All right, if we can, we'll go ahead and bring the meeting to order. It is 5:15. This is the October 10th, 2019 meeting of the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Chris Jordan, and I am the chairman of the commission. I'd like to remind everyone in the audience and the commission members and city staff, if you would silence your electronic devices, and for those that need to speak in the microphones, to please make sure to turn those on. And when you come up to the podium, if you speak, to please speak clearly and loudly if you can, so we can audio tape the proceedings tonight. I don't believe we have a council liaison tonight, so we will start out with our commission members. If you would, introduce yourself.
Emily Fretwell.
Michelle Mahoney.
Mike Lester.
Penny Quigg.
Chris Yarnell. I thought you weren't going. Go ahead.
Beth Sweeten, city staff.
Blake Marcus.
Dale Vaughn.
Dean Dutoy.
Hank Vogt.
Eric Barron, the planning manager.
Anna Naski, city planner.
Ian Zollinger, city planner.
Sonny Sanders, director of planning protective services.
Brian Wolford, city staff.
All right, thank you. For procedural matters, the city code authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absence or disqualification of a regular member. A quorum of 5 members or alternates is necessary to conduct business. I do believe we only have 1 regular member absent tonight. Well, we have 2 at this point, Jack Deacon and Bunny Tricky Cotton, but I do believe Bunny is on her way. So we have those 2 absent at this point. Do we have any alternates missing tonight? Oh, so all of our alternates are here. Is there any members who will be disqualifying themselves from any of the items this evening? Seeing none. So the voting members are as followed: Chris Yarnell, Michael Lester, Dale Vaughn, Dean Dutoy, Michelle Mahoney, Blake Marcus. Our alternates are Hank Vogt, Penny Quigg, and Emily Fretwell. The alternates are allowed to participate in the items on the agenda this evening. While we do have all of the voting members, let me count my number again. 1, 2, 3. Yes, we have plenty of regular members for voting tonight, so the alternates will not be voting this evening.
Actually, Mr. Chair, so once Bunny Tricky Cotton shows up, there'll still be 1 absent, correct? Okay. So the senior alternate is eligible to vote, and if Bunny doesn't show up by the time the 1 public hearing case is opened, starts, then the second alternate would be eligible to vote, and we can reestablish that at that time.
Learned something new tonight. Thank you. So I think Hank would be the senior alternate, and then Penny, you would follow in after that. Emily? Sorry. Okay. We will have a call for cases. I believe we only have 1 case this evening. It is case number P19019. It is a zoning code text amendment pertaining to short-term rentals. I believe that is a staff-initiated request, correct?
Yes.
So I'm sure we're good to go with that?
Yes.
Very good. Requests received for continuances. We are going to make mention that we are going to amend the agenda at this point to include the adoption of the 2020 meeting schedule. That's been provided to all the commission members tonight. I will note just real quick, on April 16th and October 15th, those 2 dates will be the 3rd Thursday of the month. We typically meet on the 2nd Thursday of the month, but due to a holiday and city staff wanting to attend a conference, we're going to change those 2 dates to the 3rd Thursday. Is there any other reasons for reordering the agenda or anything?
No.
Okay. If you would, Ian, please give us the format of the hearing and order of testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to briefly describe the procedures of the Commission. The proceedings of this meeting are being recorded, so please step forward to the microphone when you speak and give your name and address for the record. The standard order for each case is as follows. After the introduction of the request by city staff, the applicant or their consultants will provide information on the request. The opening presentation by the applicant shall be limited to 10 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission. The applicant shall have 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if requested. We will then ask to hear from supporters of the request. We will then ask to hear from opponents of the request. We will then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. Testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each unless additional time is granted by the commission. City staff will then make their recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, references to printed material, including staff reports and applicable findings, shall not be read into the record unless directed by the commission. The commission will close testimony from the floor. The commission will then discuss the proposal, then publicly make its determination with reasons. The form of the motion shall be positive, that is, the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented or with modifications, stipulations, or conditions. A final vote will be taken with ayes in favor and nays opposed. The chairman shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against. The following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting. The city code of the city of Jefferson is amended, the comprehensive plan map, the comprehensive plan and land use map, copies of applications under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, the affidavit of the publication of the public notice in newspaper, copies of drawings, plans, and/or renderings under consideration, letters of memoranda from staff, staff reports, minutes of proceedings, correspondence, or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, rules of procedure for the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are public record and available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the office of the city clerk. Please be advised that any items that are presented, distributed, or otherwise received pertaining to the cases under consideration become the property of the commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, petitions, and letters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate it. We'll move for the adoption of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended to include the 2020 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting schedule.
So moved.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Do we have a count on that? Was it? We got to have a count. Motion carries 8-0. Okay. For the record, Commission Member Bunny Tricky Cotton is arriving. Glad to have you. So we have not started the public hearing yet on the case, so she can sit in on that. So Penny? I'm out. You're out. Sorry. So, city staff has provided us the minutes for our regular meeting of September 12th, 2019. If you'd like to look through those, and when you're ready, we'll entertain a motion for those approval or amended.
I believe it should reflect that I'm an alternate, and it doesn't do so under the members present. Okay, I will add that.
Move to approve the minutes
As amended.
as amended.
You good with that?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries 8-0. Has there been any communication received? I don't believe there has been.
No.
No communications received. We will move to new business and public hearings. Case tonight is case number P19019. It is a zoning code text amendment pertaining to short-term rentals. Eric, I think that's you.
That's me.
Awesome. Tell us a
Thank
little
you.
bit about it.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so this is a staff-initiated amendment to the zoning code regarding short-term rentals. as I hope you'll recall, at least the members that were here at the time, this was fairly recently, short-term rentals were fairly recently incorporated into the zoning code. It's a fairly new land use where property on homeowners rent out their houses or maybe units, housing units in cases of multifamily type structures, or even individual bedrooms to the traveling public, usually through online based advertising businesses out there, such as Vacation Rental by Owner and Airbnb. And so the zoning code, what we inserted into the zoning code, was it about a year and a half ago, was actually two separate uses, one being a short-term rental of an entire residence, and then the other being a short-term rental of an individual lodging room. The two are very similar, and the only difference between the two is in one case it's an entire residence, such as a house that's being rented, and the other it's an individual room, more akin to renting out a spare bedroom. But the requirements for the two were very similar, and at the same time incorporated a number of specific use standards, so special standards applicable to this short-term rental use in order to address a variety of concerns that staff had, including things like parking, how many people can be over, making sure the residence isn't being used for parties and things like that. And so we've had the opportunity to process a total of 9 of these requests, and what we found is all but one of them, all 9 came through the Planning and Zoning Commission with recommendations for approval, and all but one of them went through the City Council with an approval. And the one case that did not, a fact that had a huge bearing on that is the applicant did not show up at the City Council hearing. A good number of the cases have been very controversial. However, when we, as staff, look at the comments that are being presented by the public, people who are commenting on these cases, what we've found is that a large number of those comments and those concerns are already addressed by those specific use standards. And so it's a matter of educating and making sure that the public understands that these other rules that are in place already address a lot of the concerns. But we also feel that there's been a lot of concern that, just with the unfamiliarity of this type of use, it's different. And when we compare other uses that are permitted and perfectly acceptable in the residential zoning districts, we find that there are much more other types of uses that have a much higher impact on a neighborhood than a short-term rental, and that most short-term rentals have a very low level of impact. They're fairly benign in terms of visibility and just not a whole lot of disruption to an area. And so with that, we came to a conclusion. And also, this matter was, discussed at administration committee of the City Council with similar concerns that there doesn't appear to be a whole lot of justification, so to speak, for maintaining a special exception permit process for this use. It's a very expensive type of application that has to go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission and on to the City Council. Very intensive, time-consuming process, and when we look at the results of that, we're finding it very hard to find reasons to deny, to recommend denial of these things at a staff level. And so, what we are putting in front of you this evening is a staff-initiated proposal to basically eliminate the special exception permit process associated with short-term rentals, both categories, short-term rentals as a residence and as a lodging room. For the most part, these types of applications occur in the single-family residential districts, but they are listed as a special exception use within all of the residential districts, including the rural, the neighborhood office, the conservation district, and the multifamily districts, the RA1 and RA2. They also are listed as special exceptions in the industrial zoning districts, the M1 and M2. And the reason that they were listed there is because there are, in some areas of the city, houses that happen to be contained within industrial zoning districts. And we wanted to make sure it was clear that they would be afforded the same opportunity as any other house within the city in terms of being able to, propose a short-term rental use. But obviously you could not, that type of use is subordinate to the home being a residence, so you couldn't construct one in an industrial zoning district because it is by definition an existing residence, and residential, single-family homes and such are not no longer a permitted use within a manufacturing zoning district. They're all grandfathered. So, but anyway, to transform all of them from special exception uses to permitted uses across all zoning districts within the city. The special the specific use standards for the short-term rental would remain in place as is, although there's one item, and I have it shown up on the screen here. We realized that item number 1 specifically refers to special exception use permits, and if we're eliminating them from all zoning districts, we would prefer to go ahead and strike number 1 off of the list as well, as it would no longer be relevant. And so it would likely propose that one amendment to what we have within your packet. That is what we're putting in front of you. Be happy to answer any questions and give any more insight if you have any thoughts.
Thank you, Eric. Do any of the commission members have any questions for Eric?
So yeah, I don't have any problem with the proposed change, but I was wondering if you get a complaint and somebody does violate the conditions, how is that handled?
And so it'd be handled in the same way that any other zoning code violation would be handled. Of course, there are lots of other uses across the city, and if we get complaints, we look into them, and if they're in violation, we have a variety of methods of responding to that. Typically, it's informing the property owner that they're in violation from whatever type of situation it is, and then if they do not comply, there's usually there's a couple different options that can be followed, but one of them is municipal court. So.
Any other questions commissioners would have for Eric or other city staff?
When we vote on this, we're voting on that except scratching out number 1.
Now you're voting on this, and so the way that this is arranged is it's a standard city code amendment where we strike through all of the language that we're proposing to eliminate, and then highlight with bold and underlined all of the language that we're proposing to insert. And so that's why the P's, it would be permitted uses across all of those districts instead of special exception. And then would appreciate an amendment to that to include striking of number 1 within the specific use standards so that we can remove the irrelevant information. And it'd be an irrelevant section at that point, clean our code up a bit.
Does the form of the motion have to be to include that amendment? That okay. That was kind of my question.
Yeah, we'd need that amendment in there.
Added, gotcha.
Any other questions for Eric or city staff from the commissioners? Okay. Next, we'll move to anyone in the audience. Just to be clear, the way we do this is we ask for those to come up that would like to speak in favor of the request. Then we ask for those that speak in opposition. And then lastly, anyone that would just like to speak. When you come forward, please state your name and address for the record, and then obviously give us your position on why you're here this evening. So we will start out. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward and speak in favor of this request? If so, please come forward and state your name and address.
Hi. Carla Kessel. I live at 921 Fairmount Boulevard. So we're in favor of an Airbnb. For us, we're very familiar with them. When we travel, we tend to stay in those, whether we're in the United States or out of the United States. Airbnb is usually our go-to for lots of reasons. For us, it's more affordable for families. We have 3 large teenagers, and they take up a lot of space, so one hotel room usually does not cut it very well. Families traveling with little ones, if you're in a hotel space and you've got little ones that are up at 5 a.m. and jumping up and down and making noise, if you're in an Airbnb, you have the ability to have a whole house or a lodging space. For us, we're going to be dog-friendly. So lots in Jeff City, we have 24 hotels. Only 6 are actually dog-friendly. And by dog-friendly, that's a small dog in a crate, can't be in an outside space unless they're on a leash. So we have a fenced-in yard, so we can have lots of animals and pets. Our cousin's traveling from Nashville all the time, and they have 3 under 5, and they have a dog. And they stay at Airbnbs in Columbia because there's lots of them. So when they come into town, we all travel up there, spend our money in those those restaurants, instead of them coming to Jeff City because it's just too limited. And the hotels just don't serve the purpose for 4 and 5 days. A family doesn't want to stay in a hotel for that long. So we would be pet friendly. Another purpose of the Airbnbs is having a full kitchen and cooking abilities. So going out to restaurants, that is nice, but when you're doing long-term travel, let's say you're a travel nurse, you're in town for long-term meetings, it's nice to be able to get up in the morning, make breakfast, cook in the evening, stay home in an actual home space rather than a somewhat sterile hotel. Long-term travels, we also have laundry facilities in ours, so that would be another thing that you could wash your clothes every night. You don't have to go to a laundromat. You don't have to use a laundry service in a hotel. We live on the East End, and so this one would actually be in our neighborhood. We initially bought it as a rental, but now we want to move into the Airbnb. And when it talks about the issues in the neighborhood, so this is right down the street from us, and your average on an Airbnb is about 8 to 10 rentals per month, and you also get rated and reviewed on those. So you want to keep the house as nice as possible, the amenities as nice as possible, the yard, the whole 9 yards. So for us, we would only want something that's going to look nice because we're going to look at it every single day. Being on the historic East End as well, we've had a lot of damage, clearly in May, and we're trying to all recover from that, and we've lost some really beautiful, nice buildings. So for us, too, it's a way that we have travel and tourism coming in and to showcase how nice the East End is, close to the Capitol. We're right in LU's backyard, so great for all of their events, homecoming, things like that. And then, sorry, I just lost my place here. But that's our incentive to keep the Airbnbs nice. So I think most of the owners of these properties, whether some friends of ours have one and they just rent out their lower space, it's their home. So they're going to keep it nice because they own it and they live in it, where we also have a house that's a full-time rental. Those people are in it. We don't get in to see it about, once a year. They don't trim the yard as nice as we would like. There's several things they don't do that up to our standards, but it's a rental. So once they're in it, you don't have any control over, those things and keeping the house up nice. So I think the Airbnbs can really be an addition to a neighborhood, keeping the houses up, and just great for the travel and tourism in Jeff City.
Okay. Thank
Thank you.
Don't run off on me, Carl. Hold on. Let me ask if any commission members have any questions for you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to come forward and speak in favor of this request? Seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in opposition to this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Lastly, I'll ask if there's anyone who'd like to speak on this request. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. At this point, we will close public testimony Eric, is there anything you would like to add?
No, just recommended form of motion at the bottom. Staff recommendation is, of course, for approval. I would appreciate the one amendment to include the first of the specific provisions, to eliminate that. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
All right, thank you, Eric. Do any commission members have any questions for Eric or other city staff? And if not, we will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the text of Chapter 35, zoning to establish short-term rental of residence. And short-term rental of a lodging room as permitted use in the residential and industrial zoning districts, eliminating the specific short-term rental standard of number 1, special exception.
Specific provision number 1 within the special exception.
What he said.
Or
That's
within
what
the specific use
That's my
standards.
amendment to my
That's
motion.
what you said, right?
Uh-huh, that's what I said.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries 8-0. Eric, this will be forwarded back to the city council, correct? And it is a public hearing?
Yes, it will go on to the city council and be scheduled for a public hearing in front of them on November 14th, which is a Monday. November 18th, which is a Monday, at 6 p.m.
November 18th at 6 p.m. Again, that will be a public hearing. If you'd like to come and support that again, you're welcome to do that. If not, that's fine too. But November 18th, City Council will hear it as a public hearing. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to other business. We have a presentation on the Historic Preservation Plan. Who's doing that this evening? Okay.
Okay. Am I close enough to the microphone? So, as many of you know, our department has been working on a historic preservation plan for Jefferson City, and today I'm just going to go over what the contents are within that plan. So the plan is proposed to be adopted within the comprehensive plan, and that's why you guys are hearing it today, because you guys are the keeper of the comprehensive plan. Yeah, and this is just the informal presentation, and the formal vote will occur later next month. So, first things first, what is a historic preservation plan? Well, the Jefferson City Historic Preservation Plan will provide the community with a focused document specifically concentrating on the city's unique issues and opportunities to guide historic preservation efforts throughout their city. So there are a lot of historic, assets in Jefferson City. We're all aware of that. And this plan helps us all work together to leverage and preserve those historic assets in a productive way. And it's also important to understand that any of the recommendations listed in the plan, they will not force anything to happen automatically, for anything to change automatically, and this is a plan for all people to use, whether it's the Historic Preservation Commission, City Council, other stakeholders, and the public. Everyone can use this document to spearhead and focus their historic preservation efforts. So this is a timeline that reflects our process that we've undergone for this project. We've gone through phases 1 through 4 already. Phases 1 that started in late 2018, where the city released an RFP for the Historic Preservation Plan, and we contracted with Heritage Strategies to produce this plan. In phase 2, those consultants had their first visit, and they met with the Historic Preservation Commission to begin their research and analysis. Then in phase 3, another visit occurred, and it was also the initial stages of the public engagement processes. And then in phase 4, after all that research and the initial public engagement happened, is when the consultants started to draft the goals and strategies of the plan. Then to conclude with phase 5, that's the phase we are currently in, we are reviewing the draft plan and putting it in front of the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission, you guys, for recommendation and final approval. Then there will be a resolution from the city council to kind of conclude this whole process, and you guys being the approval factor for this plan is very similar to what was done with the South Side plan that was developed a couple of years ago, just for reference. So now I'm going to go over a little bit more of the community engagement aspects, because I really want to drive home that there were stakeholders and the public involved in this plan. So the Historic Preservation Focus Group that was formed to inform the planning process and to keep stakeholders and the public involved. And then several interest group sessions were held to form the planning themes of this plan, and those were helped to base the goals and strategies off of. I'm going to get more into those details later, but we had a historic neighborhoods, commercial and institutional nodes, historic preservation, and storytelling and tourism interest group sessions. We also held several public meetings and kept the Historic Preservation Commission involved throughout this whole process. Now, plans are very multi-leveled. They're usually formed with this ladder in mind to transfer wants to action items. So there's the vision statement, and that is the guiding essence of the plan. And then there are the goals, which are the value statements that help put the vision into motion. And then there are the strategies, which are action statements to make the goals a reality. So I'm going to go through these items in this manner so you can understand the contents of the plan. So this is the vision statement. It was created by the consultants through their understanding of our history and where the community wants to go. The vision statement is created to shape our direction and purpose for the Historic Preservation Plan, and it reads, residences and businesses in Jefferson City recognize the central role that heritage plays in community identity and quality of life. Our attraction to the city is infused with the sense of the city's landscapes and how they have grown and changed over time. We value the physical and spiritual connections between the places we create today and the places created by our forebears. We view our identity and quality of place as an asset, the cultivation and enhancement of which draws new businesses, visitors, and residents to our region. So it's just a nice overarching statement for this plan. So now that I've gone over the vision statement, I'm going to move on to the goals. And remember that the goals are value statements that are to help put that vision that I just read off into motion. So goal 1, and I apologize that that picture is dark in this room, but goal 1 states, reinforce the role of Jefferson City's historic core as central to the city's identity and long-term economic development strategy. Emphasize quality of place. Now, quality of place is the physical characteristic of a community or a space, so that is well designed, planned, and maintained, and how those affects the characteristic and the way people live, interact, and feel about it. So, for example, downtown has a distinct quality of place because of the aesthetics of downtown and the way we value downtown culturally here in Jefferson City. Goal 2 states, activate and revitalize Jefferson City's historic commercial centers and residential neighborhoods as distinctive places for living and investing. Goal number 3 states, connect the city's historic core to its outlying suburban neighborhoods through transportation enhancements, parks, open space, trails, bikeways, programming, public facilities, and other initiatives. So we don't want the benefits of historic preservation to be isolated. This type of activity is really important for all areas of the city, whether or not they specifically have a historical asset in it or not. And when those assets are connected properly, similar to like any beneficial amenity, those can have rippling effects, positive effects on the whole community. That's kind of what this goal is pertaining to. Goal 4 states, use the city's historic preservation, neighborhood services, and planning programs strategically to stimulate private investment in the revitalization of historic areas. And the last goal states, actively engage residents and visitors with information, interpretation, and programming that reinforces community identity and tells the city's stories. So this fits into the wayfinding identity category. So for example, I know it's hard to read, but there is one of the wayfinding signs located in downtown in the back of that slide. We want residents and visitors to understand and connect with Jefferson City as a distinctive place, and this helps them to continue to use and be a part of the community. It is very much like brand recognition is kind of the overall sum of this goal. So first, I did vision statement, and then I read through goals, and lastly, I'm going to go over the strategies. Now, I'm just going to go over a few of the highlights. There are many more within the plan, but just for the sake of time, I'm just going to go over some of the most important ones. And remember that these strategies are action statements that help make the goals a reality. And like I mentioned before, there are also overarching themes to these strategies, and they just help categorize the strategies, and the plan is also organized in the same fashion. So the first theme is general historic preservation, and this relates to the city and all stakeholders dealing with historic preservation. And the theme mainly covers coordinating those historic preservation tools and resources with revitalization and enhancement strategies. So, firstly, the plan suggests that we continue to participate in the Certified Local Government, or CLG, program. Now, this is jointly administered by the National Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Offices, and communities like us, we've worked through a certification process to become recognized as a CLG. And once certified, and we've been certified for like roughly 10 years, this participation in the Federal Historic Preservation Program allows us access to benefits while following certain federal and state requirements. And benefits of participating in this CLG program includes funding, like we have access to different grants, and also technical assistance from the federal and state level, like help with surveys and nominations, trainings, and assistance with commissions. And then overall, there's a sustainability factor where if we help improve and strengthen our historic distressing landmarks, there are economic and social and environmental benefits associated with that. So just pretty generally. And then this ties into A3, which the plan suggests that we continue to survey historic neighborhoods, such as the West Main Architectural Survey that just undertook. This is a map that highlights some of the surveys, some of the results from that survey. This neighborhood now has a professional analysis about the historical assets from their neighborhood, and this detailed information can be used to apply for national or local designations. As you can see, there are lots of contributing properties and a few like specific nominations that could take place. So it's just really good information for them to move forward with understanding the historical assets in their community. A few more recommendations that I'm going to highlight in this category includes encouraging the designation of more local landmarks, and we need to provide more information and resources about how people can appropriately maintain and treat their properties. So if someone wants to, if they have a historic property, they don't feel nervous about rehabilitating said property, they have the information that they need to undertake those projects. So the next strategy theme is planning and development, and this theme aims at aligning historic preservation strategies with Jefferson City's planning programs and processes. So for example, the plan suggests that we should incorporate the Historic Preservation Plan's vision and goals for community identity and quality of place as organizing concepts for the comprehensive plan update. I'm also developing the comprehensive plan, so it's safe to say that community identity and quality of place are aligning themes with that plan. and Jefferson City should strengthen its parks, trails, signage, and interpretation system. We've gone over that a little bit with the goals that I mentioned previously. This basically means that the public spaces should exhibit a connection between visitors and the physical landscapes. So it's not only functional, but it tells a story about the significance of our community. And here are some examples of interpretation signs. You can see that they are both engaging and informational, and the plan believes that some of these signs would be beneficial to our community, spread throughout. I believe that there are signs like this on the MSP site, and there are some proposed for Community Park, but there are plenty of sites throughout the community that these type of signs would be appropriate for. So, and then similar to the recommendation mentioned in the Historic Preservation Strategy theme, this one connects back to community education, where there just needs to be like a common understanding of the codes and the building requirements associated with historic structures, so people and developers and stakeholders feel confident and that they have the right tools to pursue a historic renovation project. And then there is the commercial center strategy theme, which focuses on how commercial centers are obviously a source of economic activity. And one of the strategies that the plan suggests involves the Main Street approach. And the National Main Street Center is a subsidiary of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And this Main Street approach is a program that focuses on revitalizing older and historic commercial centers to build vibrant neighborhoods and thriving economies. They focus on 4 specific points that help guide and/or there are goals to help achieve and maintain said vibrant downtowns and historic nodes. They include economic vitality, which specifically focuses on entrepreneurship and economic opportunities. And of course, we want these places to make money and to be economically viable, which makes sense. And then there's design, which incorporates the aesthetic space so that it celebrates the historic character, but that it's also functional for people to use. And then there's organization, which includes leadership and partners to help make those spaces successful, because it's better to have one said organization to watch over and to pursue said opportunities in downtowns or commercial nodes. And then there's also promotion, which is again about brand recognition and local buy-in. So a lot of communities have joined or aligned themselves with these principles because they understand that the approach really does help leverage downtowns and other historic nodes. A few other strategies to highlight within this theme involve the establishment of an overlay district over downtown. There's currently one over Capitol Avenue, and also to establish a multi-site community improvement district, which can incorporate several smaller commercial nodes all under one CID. The Dunklin Street / Old Munich area currently has a CID in place, and they have used this to fund several sidewalk and infrastructure projects to help in that community. Now I'm going to go over historic neighborhoods, and this strategy focuses on making historic neighborhoods a distinctly attractive place for residential living. And this can be accomplished by establishing neighborhood associations, so residents feel that they are engaged and connected to their neighborhood and their neighbors, and having design guidelines to help illustrate the appropriate treatments for historic structures, so property owners, again, know that they have recommended avenues for rehabilitating their property. Now, sometimes the words guidelines and standards can be used interchangeably, but in the context of this plan, I'm just going to give you a quick little definition education. So guidelines means that they are recommended and voluntary. So for example, the West Main neighborhood, now that they have that survey and they have some more information about the significant styles that are within their neighborhood, they could draft some design guidelines for their community so neighbors can all have a common understanding about what the appropriate fixtures and designs for their facade should be. But standards are regulatory. So for example, an overlay district, like we have on Capitol Avenue, where those properties within the Capitol Avenue overlay district have to follow a certain set of design standards that are located within our zoning code. So this recommendation that's listed in D6 is pertaining to the voluntary recommended design guidelines path. Now, this is the last strategy theme. I know I've said a lot, but this one pertains to tourism and storytelling and how it can be an economic development and revitalization tool. So one of the recommendations of the plan talks about continuing that citywide wayfinding and signage program. This obviously helps residents and visitors get around our city and be notified of landmarks. And Jefferson City also needs to uphold the culture of having local historians and historic preservation stakeholders to practice the research and documentation of our history, keeping our story alive via publications or online sources. It's just really beneficial for the long-standing story of our community. Here are a few examples, such as the wayfinding signs, similar to what I showed you before. They can be expanded to several areas of our community. There are several books that have been published specifically about Jefferson City's history. Keeping that culture and support for those authors is really important, and also making sure that there is an increased digital presence and creative branding for Jefferson City will keep Jefferson City up with today's trends and stay on people's radars. So, for example, the Jefferson City Convention and Visitors Bureau just commissioned a really nice video highlighting some of Jefferson City's landmarks. You know, showcasing more stuff like that is important for the long sustainability of our community. So, I just gave you, remember that I just gave, a few highlights of some of the recommendations listed within the plan, so you can read more of that later, but that concludes my presentation on just the content of the plan. To go over a quick timeline of how we're going to wrap up, we're obviously here at the October 10th informal presentation. On October 22nd, there will be a special HPC meeting where I'll go over the same presentation with the HPC, and they will give their recommendation for the plan. On November 14th, you guys will get the joy of hearing this presentation again, and you will make a final approval or whatever, you will hear this again and make your recommendation for this plan. And then tentatively, this would go before City Council for a resolution after your guys' decision on December 16th. To go over the full content of the plan, you can find that on our city's website, or copies can be reviewed at City Hall. We are still working out a few formatting kinks with the plan, so we will email you guys out the final version after those formatting situations have been dealt with later. So you can review it between now and the next meeting. Send any comments that you might have, or for the public, directed to our department. There's our phone number and my email, which you can send comments to, but I can also answer any questions or concerns right now. Thank you. Yep.
The CID, how does that work? Does a neighborhood get together and decide that they want to start a CID? Or is that more of a conversation outside?
Where's Brian when we need him? I think it's a collection of property owners, and then I'm not entirely familiar with the process, but I believe that there's some sort of enabling vote of some sort, and then it's very legal.
Does the city put money into that CID? Or is it something that they all get together and...
Currently, I do not believe the city puts money into it. I believe they may either choose a couple different ways of funding it. Sales tax is one of them, or property owners may say a certain percentage of this or that. I'm not quite sure how it functions at that level, but...
I can ask more questions later, but I was just curious.
We'll certainly find out, though.
Any other questions for city staff from the commissioners?
I will make one follow-up statement just to make sure you all have a general understanding of why this is being presented to you for adoption as a component of the comprehensive plan. It's important to have the plan in place. There's a number of different things contained within this document that are very relevant to planning and even zoning type recommendations. So it's important for this body to be comfortable with the plan and for that document to legally be incorporated into the comprehensive plan so that, we and the planning division, but also the other departments of the city that have relevant components of this have a firm foundation to move forward. To give an example of another kind of general content document that has been incorporated into the comprehensive plan, it's been many years. I don't believe many of you were on the commission at the time, but the Jefferson City Greenway Plan was adopted as a component of the city's comprehensive plan. And so it is something that is relevant and appropriate for adoption into the comp plan.
So this will be back before us on November 14th. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for the presentation. Comprehensive plan update? Who gets that?
Well, I put in there, I guess, in the wrong spot, but the update on prior cases, the text amendment pertaining to medical marijuana facilities will be going before it was read to the city council this last week, and then will be going before the city council again for a deciding vote later this month, 21st. And then there's the update.
So we are in the final month of the community engagement portion for the comprehensive plan. So there's still an opportunity for the public to be involved. We've got the mapping workshop on the 24th, and then the online survey will be open till November 1st. So I highly encourage all of you guys to spread this news with everyone. I've left little business cards next to each one of your packets. Anyone who lives, works, or plays in Jefferson City is encouraged to participate. And I know that it can seem strange, to just talk about your hopes and your dreams for a plan like this, but the contents in the comprehensive plan can have a real effect of what happens here in Jefferson City, like the Greenway plan that Eric just mentioned. That was identified as a priority in the last comp plan, and we've seen those very much well be implemented today, and people love it. So people want to share what they want to be prioritized through the next 20 years. This is their opportunity. We've got one more month to go before we start drafting the plan. There will be more community engagement later, but it is important to have your initial priorities heard at this beginning stage. So if you've not attended a meeting, please do. If you've not done the online survey or please do that. And convince a friend or coworker or family member to also participate in the plan. Thank you. Answer any questions about the comp plan as well.
Have you guys reached out to organizations, and I'm just going to go with some of that are prominent with the developmental properties and things like that, but the Home Builders Association, the Board of Realtors, they all have weekly, or not weekly, but usually monthly meetings. Even, other organizations, whether it be Lions clubs or things like that. Have you guys, reached out to those people and offered to go to those meetings and things like that?
Yeah, we have been in contact with all of those stakeholders, and, some have participated, some have not, but we've been reaching out to as many people as possible to get involved. The Board of Realtors, they made a big contribution.
Nice. Well, nice job on your all's part. It's good to see the city reaching out to the citizens and those involved that truly are the stakeholders about how that comprehensive plan will help to develop this community going forward. So appreciate you guys doing that. Any other questions for city staff on the comprehensive plan update? Okay, we've already done the updates on the prior cases. Do we need to vote on this? You do want a true vote on this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so as amended, we do have the 2020 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting schedule. As I mentioned earlier, all of our meetings will be on the second Thursday of every month except for April, where will be April 16th, and then October, it will be October 15th. So at the suggestion of city staff, we will entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we approve the proposed Planning and Zoning Commission meeting schedule for 2020.
I second that motion.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Is there anything else from city staff?
One item I would like to announce. I believe there's a newspaper article on it. Staff had presented to the Public Works and Planning Committee, I believe it was last month, and so the newspaper article dates to about a month ago, I think just shortly right around or just after the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. But detailing that staff basically presented the intent to pursue a formation of a proposal for a downtown overlay district. Put that together and go through a public involvement process, specifically with the downtown property owners and business owners, but also the general public, to put something in place for design standards downtown. We think that it's been spoken about, from time to time in the past, and we think it's an important thing to have in place. Most people are unaware that there are no design standards downtown. I think the general public would think that there's something in place, and the reality is there is not. That if somebody wants to build a building downtown, there's no design standards that they have to follow. So I wanted to make sure that you are aware of that, that we're intending to move forward with that. We would typically go through a public process before it comes in front of you for any kind of consideration. That wouldn't preclude you from participating in that public process, but certainly if anyone has any questions on that, feel free to give me a call. Our general intent is, because there's still some homework to be done on the subject, but to have something together this fall and hopefully be moving forward with something but around the end of the year or by the end of the year. So, and that is what I wanted to say.
We think those standards might include something about cleaning up buildings that are falling down for 2 years.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's a tough story. It really is. So,
Do we know, is there any set date on that? I know the permit's been approved, everything's ready to go. Is there any?
I believe there's been a communication to the property owners with a deadline. I'm not sure if that is intended to be public yet. I don't know if they received the communication, so I'd rather wait until they do so they don't find out right now, but there was a communication today to the property owners.
So we might see some activity.
I would anticipate some activity, something done before the end of the year, definitely.
That'd be nice.
I
think
do know
everybody's ready.
I do know the property owners have been doing further structural forensic investigations. I'm not sure that's not the right term, but they have been studying all the components of both of the buildings in more detail to help determine what possibly can be saved as opposed to demolished. So I think most people would rather see a building stand, if possible, for the future versus taking it down if it doesn't need to come down.
Very true. Well, I know it's been a struggle for both sides of the aisle there, so it'd be nice to see some progress and get our sidewalks and streets back. So with that, is there anything else from the commission members or city staff? If not, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for coming this evening. On what? The calendar?